On this video, I would like to continue some more episodes in the books of 1st and 2nd Kings. We have looked at Elijah, and now I want to continue looking at Elisha, and especially some of the wonderful miracles that Elijah performed. So I'm reading uh, chapter 4, verses 1 and following, verses 1 to 3. We're going to see the miracle of the widow's oil. And so it says, there was a certain woman from the wives of the sons of the prophets, uh, and she cried. There cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets, saying unto Elijah, saying, Abdacha Ishmael, your servant my husband is dead, and you know that your servant did fear the Lord, and a creditor is come to take him, to take unto him, I should say that is the creditor, uh, two of my children to be servants. Now, as we look at this text, uh, notice after Elisha's miraculous prediction of the Moabite defeat and its fulfillment, the author continues with more of the prophet's miraculous acts. The chapter begins with the miracle of making oil for a widow to pay off a debt. Literally, the Hebrew reads, a certain woman from the wives of the sons of the prophets. The prophets, priests, and Levites were all allowed to marry. 99% of the Israelites lived at an economic level just above poverty. Any bad luck, such as the sudden death of one adult male in the family, or an accident to finish goods on the way to market, or a drought, might be disastrous. Selling children, or even oneself, was not rare in Israel, as evidenced in several legal passages attempting to mitigate these evils, and also in the writings of the prophets. In the story, a wife whose husband had died needs help, for her two children are about to be enslaved. And the text went on to say that a creditor basically is come to take unto him my two sons. V'hanoshe ba lekachat et shnei yeladai lo le'avadim, to take my two sons to be servants. So uh, basically, it looks like here the creditor was demanding money and pledged. Uh, there was a pledge, evidently, of two sons as security, a very common form of pledge, as we had stated. The stipulated time for the repayment of the debt had passed, and the creditor now wanted to recover the loan. This he could do by putting the two boys into slave employment on his farm or in his trade. And so we continue then in verse 2 as the text reads, and Elisha said unto her, what shall I do for you? Vayomer Eliah Elilsha, ma asela. And she said, your handmaid has not anything in the house save a pot of oil. And so I need help. She said, there is not for your handmaiden anything. Call babayit ki im asuk shaman, a pot of oil. So as we think about this jar of olive oil, in light of the lady's problem, Elisha asked her what she had in her house. The reply was that she had only a pot of oil. Possibly the widow's statement was literally true, or possibly the widow meant that this was all she had of any value. The poor people of Israel, the huge majority, lived, worked, ate, and slept in a one-room house with a bare minimum of furniture, furnishings, and utensils. Elisha directed her to borrow empty vessels, as many as she could round up. Then, closing herself up in her house with her children, she was to pour oil from her own jar into the borrowed ones, setting them aside as they become filled until there was no empty jars left. Oil was the invaluable staple item for cooking and lighting, and it also had toilet and medicinal values or uses. Grain, wine, and olive oil were the three great cash crops of Palestine. The contents of the jars could repay the debt, release her children from the pledge, and provide a nest egg for making a new start. So, as we read these verses, notice uh, Elijah then said, go borrow vessels abroad from your neighbors, even empty vessels. Borrow not a few. And you shall go in, and you shall shut the door upon you and upon your sons, and pour out into some of those vessels, and you shall set aside that which is full. So, as we were commenting, she went from him, shut the door upon her and upon her sons, and they brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. And notice then verse 6. It reads, Vayehi kimlot ha-kelim. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, Vetomer el Benah Hagisha, that she said unto her son, bring me yet another vessel. Hagisha Eli od Keli. And he said unto her, there is not a vessel more. But Vayomer Eleha ein od Keli Vaya Amod Hashaman. There is not a vessel more, and the oil stood or remained. It's interesting. Stood would be the translation, I believe. So, what we have here is that the oil stopped flowing. The benevolent object for which the miracle had been performed had been accomplished. The oil stopped flowing, and there was a miracle that Elisha had done. So we move on to the miracle then of the Shunammite uh, son in verses 18 to 37. So Elisha predicted the birth of a child to this woman who had been kind to him, and he later raised that same child who had died. So I want to wait before going into that. It's quite a few verses on that we have to read. And this will be followed by an amazing miracle that the Lord allowed Elisha to do. And then there will be the miracle of the poisonous pottage that we'll look at that. And some other miracles that is done, like multiplying bread and so forth. And what is interesting, I think, as a Christian uh, minister, is that many of these miracles are then performed by Christ. And so Elisha becomes like a type of Christ in a lot of the miracles that he performed. And Baal was known to take care of widows. But here we're seeing the one who's taking care of the widows is Yahweh. He's the one that is performing this and carrying out what Baal was purported to do, Yahweh does.